So Jeremy, I'm thinking that when I hire mbaMission, I want to go to either Harvard, Stanford, or Wharton, or bust. And I wonder what you think the differences are among those three programs. And then, if you can't get into HSW, what about the other MBA programs? Do they stand up? Are they meaningful? Can they change your life?
First of all, I would say I think you're mostly right with that. I think that our clientele definitely skews towards Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, but we do get applicants who are applying across the M7 and then also across the top 15 as well. But definitely skewing towards Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. We probably send a few percentage points of every class to those schools, if not more, when you think about percentage points. And we've been doing that for 20 years. So we know the schools pretty well. I think experientially, there's nuance, right? Top down, I think you're going to have a fantastic experience at Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. I think if you took the branding aspect out of it and you took the name off of it in a blind taste test and didn't tell someone theoretically where they were, everyone would walk out saying, "Wow, those were three absolutely amazing experiences." And I think that might even be true across the top 10 or top 15.
Right.
If you truly could create a blind experience for people, I think people would be delighted at all of those programs. They have remarkable intellectual leadership at all of those programs. They have very strong community experiences where you can travel the world and get to know amazing international cohorts and diversity of individuals who are going to inform your education and all the things that make MBA programs extremely special as experiences. When you look at a Harvard, you're going to have an experience that's going to be different because the case method is a very different experience for you, and it's a very specific experience to be entering into that every single day, not just as a pedagogical tool, but also as a cohort experience. And there's something distinct about that. But I think from a top-down, I feel good about my education perspective, yes, it's a very specific way to learn, and it probably appeals to certain people. You're still going to feel great about, maybe a more balanced approach at Wharton, where they're not going to be as case dependent, where it's going to change from individual to individual, from individual class to individual class. At Stanford, they're going to give you kind of the opposite. You're going to have a ton of flexibility in your experience from day one that you're not going to have at Harvard. So, those things are and we're just touching on the surface of them. Those things kind of flow through the entire program and your experience. The rigidity of that gives you a cohort, identity at Harvard, right? And at Stanford, you might have kind of a broader identity with it because it's so flexible and might get to know more people quicker. All these things are going to flow through the experience and change your experience in different ways and ultimately add up to a lot. But again, sort of top down, there's no question that the experiences are really, really going to be fulfilling and rewarding, for applicants at any of those schools.
Now, some people worry that Harvard would be too competitive, too cutthroat. Do you think that's true?
I don't think that that's true. I mean, I think you've got huge community at Harvard, almost 1,000 people. And I think you're going to find some very competitive people at Harvard. By and large, I think that everyone recognizes that there's an imprimatur of that's extremely strong coming out of Harvard, and I don't think anyone at this point, is worried. Oh, I'm competing directly one-to-one, Jeremy against John, and I have to defeat John at all costs. I think the opportunities for MBAs are so vast at this point that I think that's really not an issue, and it may have been that way many years ago. But I think the recruiters are still coming to campus. The salaries are still going up, and I don't think that there's any school out there at this point where I would worry about directing someone there saying look, you got to make sure that you're ready to wear the brass knuckles because it's dog eat dog over there. That's just not the case. And I think that's also just generational. I think this is a generation that basically puts a premium on getting along with each other and enjoying each other in a way that maybe they didn't in the class of 1950
yeah, exactly right.
at Harvard Business School.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, these schools do go beyond the stereotypes. So if I'm interested in finance, it doesn't mean that I should only go to Wharton if I'm accepted there. If I'm interested in entrepreneurship, it doesn't mean that I should go to Stanford over Harvard. And if I'm interested in general management, I should definitely go to Harvard over Stanford or Wharton. These are old conceptions of what these schools are, right?
Yeah, I mean, these are effectively dangerous tropes in some ways as an applicant, right?
Right.
Because as an applicant, if you believe that, Stanford is all about entrepreneurship and you have to be an entrepreneur to get into Stanford, and you are not an entrepreneur, as most people are not going to business school. If you are, say, a speechwriter, which is what I was before I went to business school, and you say, well, I'm actually an entrepreneur as a speechwriter, and I should be in an entrepreneurial track, it doesn't even make sense. And so people end up trying to contort their applications to fit what they perceive a school wants, and that ends up completely destroying their applications because the school looks at it and it just doesn't compute. Or people write, Harvard's all about leadership, and they write it every sixth sentence about how they've been a leader, and they throw the word leader in as if these people are not going to understand what's going on. Like, oh, they wrote leader 10 times, we're going to let them in. The other part of it that's dangerous is that you start to deny yourself the best fit for yourself, because you might say to yourself, like, oh, well, Kellogg is actually a brand management school, and I'm going to apply there because it's a brand management school. I'm talking about brand. Well, actually, Kellogg sent a lot of people to consulting they sent more people to consulting probably for a decade now.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe more. And they've got other strengths. So if you say, look, like maybe the opposite, like, oh, it's a brand management school, I want to be a consultant, I'm not going to go there. Well, you've just denied yourself a school that sends tons of people to consulting. And, Wharton is a finance school. Well, Wharton sends lots of people to consulting. And really, if you're looking at, finance, consulting, brand management, general management, I mean, the top 15 schools are all going to be able to get you on their way. Maybe if you're looking at real niches, you want to work in healthcare, maybe Wharton's a little better for that because they've got their unique healthcare program, and Duke has one too. And you want to work in biotech startups, maybe you're looking at MIT a little more closely because they're so tied in there. There are obviously unique strengths at every school, but they're not sort of the high level big 4 or 5 employers, employment categories that are out there, which virtually every program serves.
And when you get into the second tier, that may be more important, right? Like, okay, for healthcare, Vanderbilt or Johns Hopkins MBA might be a good play for you. If you're in supply chain management, Michigan State maybe, right? Which are schools that tend to be below the radar.
Every individual should be asking themselves before they apply, can this program get me where I want to go? People are so concerned about brands, right? They're so concerned about brands and they assume the brand will get them where they want to go. And while this might fly in the face of what I started with, but you have to say to yourself, I fundamentally understand what this experience is, and I will be happy, I will thrive in this environment, and I will have the outcomes I want.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily come by getting the brand that's going to impress your grandmother. So we have individuals who say, I'm going to apply to these schools because they have global branding. Well, if they have global branding, and you definitively know that you're not going to fit in a case method environment, and you definitively can say, I don't want to speak in class, I don't relate well to the individual narratives, I relate better to lessons, whatever it is. I mean, there's going to be some casework at any school, but you shouldn't be at HBS or Darden or the University of Western Ontario or ESA, or even Tuck, which has a strong case orientation,
teaching,
Yale, which has their raw cases.
Although I would argue that if I feel uncomfortable speaking,
you should
I want to put that.
Yeah, you should go.
I want to go there because I want to fix that problem, because it is a problem.
Right, I would agree.
If you want to be successful,
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But I think that in theory, if someone can say, I fundamentally can't. This school doesn't work with my personality. It doesn't matter how strong the brand is.
Yeah, exactly.
You get into, every once in a while we have someone who calls us and says, I went to Stanford to walk the campus, sit in a class, and I don't know if it's the right school for me. Or I went to Harvard, I went to Wharton. This happens at all schools. As if there's something wrong with them. As if this is a perfect environment. This environment it mints leaders. And how could it not fit for me? But if that's your intuition, you shouldn't apply. The inverse of that is we get people who get accepted to 2 schools. I got accepted to Chicago and Columbia. Which one should I go to? And of course, you should go to the one that you feel that click with, like any In my heart, I know that this one is better for this reason. But it's not that one leads to riches and the other to destitution. If you like both of them, you're going to be okay. They're both going to give you the career. They're both going to give you the lift because you, at the end of the day, are the variable, like not the school.
Right.
The school isn't speaking for you 20 years into your career. I think that's a misconception that a lot of applicants have. They believe that the school is everything. And if you talk to someone at Apollo, I'm making it up, picking a top private equity firm, if you were to say to someone, where did your colleagues go to school? They wouldn't know, or they wouldn't care. They'd be like, what is the outcome that they've driven for us?
True. And it may well be that there are a lot of other factors that trump brand. Okay, if I want a smaller, more intimate, elite MBA experience, I should be looking at Berkeley and I should be looking at Tuck, right? And if you want to talk about severe, deep bonding among students that leads to great alumni satisfaction, it's hard to beat Dartmouth Tuck because of the residential program. Yeah. You're stuck in Hanover, New Hampshire.
I love that.
I use the word stuck, but I mean that in a positive way.
Yeah, of course.
Because there are no distractions. You don't have people with sharp elbows because they're going to pay the consequences in a small culture like that, right?
Of course.
And everyone is really like this.
And everyone has moved there to create the program together, so that people have no choice but to focus on creating friendships in that community because they're not drafting their class out of Hanover. Yeah. You've got 250 people or 280 people who are moving to Hanover to create an experience. And this is not to take anything away from, let's say, NYU or Columbia or something like that, where they're going to get a substantial portion of the class from New York, and those people will still have their friendships, and they'll still have maybe their college friends still live there, and I think they have very strong communities at those schools. Yeah. But you have more of an opportunity to opt in or opt out, and that might work for some people. Some people might be overwhelmed by Tuck, Yale, Darden, Michigan, where the communities are extremely strong, and you sort of have to opt in both academically and socially to thrive in those environments. Yeah. And maybe that's overwhelming for someone. Maybe you don't want to go on a date and run into 12-year classmates. Maybe you enjoy New York and go to
NYU or Columbia
and Chicago or
go to your apartment and far away from the campus and control it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really true.
Yeah.
Okay, you went to UVA Darden. You had a great experience there. If you had to do it again, would you go back?
Look, I had a wonderful experience there, and I was our class graduation speaker, not as an academic honor, but as an example of that I really lived the experience and really was a strong part of the community, which I take a lot of pride in. Yeah. And so I had a wonderful experience there. I think if I were to apply again, I think I would apply to schools like that. I think I would apply to schools like Darden, Tuck, Yale, and I would do exactly what I said at the beginning. I would say, I recognize that there, maybe I could get a brand bump from Harvard, that might be good for me, but I would thrive in a community like this. I knew that about myself, and I basically only applied to schools that were in small, robust communities. Times were different. This is 25 years ago when I was applying, a little less, I guess. I don't want to age myself too much.
I think Darden is actually even stronger now than it had been, probably.
It was, I don't pay attention to rankings, as we've talked about over the years. All these schools, they float in and out of the top 10. And I guess what I'm saying is I would self-identify as someone who would thrive on a real college campus with smaller schools where you can really be a strong community member, because that was really valuable to me. Right. And I'm sure there's obviously selection bias. I'm sure if you talk to any number of the members of our team who went to Harvard, they'd be like, Harvard or die,
I like what you say about the brand bump. There is a brand bump, but there's a brand bump for all of these great schools.
There's a brand bump for doing excellent work.
Yeah.
There's a brand bump for doing excellent work. And when you get to, I've got a classmate of mine who's at Morgan Stanley. He, I believe, is the last person in his cohort that started there, that's still there. He's a managing director. And, he's not there because he went to Darden. There are people at Wharton, I'm sure, in his class, and Harvard in his class who aren't there anymore. He's there because he had like a preternatural ability to do the work.
Yeah.
And so, you don't survive on brand. You just don't. You survive on work.
Yeah.
And that's like, I remember D. Leopold, who you're a fan of, and
I'm a very big fan.
former HBS, director of admissions, a wonderful person. She once said to me, one of the problems is that I think people think that Harvard equals easy streets, and that's not the case. Right. You still have to go out there and earn it every day. And we have a half dozen people on our team who went to Harvard Business School. They're not sitting back and saying, well, I'll let the brand do the work for me. They're delivering for our clients every day.
And in fact, the expectations may be unrealistic or higher for someone with a Harvard MBA.
I think that's true. I think there's a bit of a sense that unless you're, Andy Jassy at Amazon, unless you're Jack Welch, an individual well, or you're Steve Ballmer. I don't think of some of the other great CEOs that have been minted, or at Wharton, if you're the Warby Parker guys. You don't have to be these individuals to be successful in life. And I think that there's a weight of expectation at some of the top schools that can become burdensome on some at times.
And let's face it, the most famous graduate of Harvard Business School with an MBA, George W. Bush. The most famous graduate of Wharton, although not with an MBA, Donald Trump. Okay? Without getting political, you don't need to say anything about that. Okay?
It's funny you say that. I mean, I was wondering where you were going to go with that.
Yeah.
I think, look, if you look at the alumni rolls of every school, they've all minted some very, very impressive leaders.
Totally.
And I would say is it the tail wagging the dog? I think so. I think, those people would have been successful regardless of where they went to school. I don't think that Jack Welch would have been a nobody had he not gone to Harvard Business School. Maybe there's someone who, I listened to a podcast with Seth Klarman, who's probably the most legendary value investor outside of Warren Buffett, and he went to Harvard Business School, and I believe I think there's a Klarman Center for him at Harvard now. I think he's been a good benefactor for Harvard. And he kind of talked about how he was in the right place at the right time to become a value investor before he went to Harvard. And then when he got there, he had the benefit of a Harvard professor who kind of tapped him for his first job. And I wonder if you were to ask him, had he not chosen Harvard, if he still would have gotten there, because he had all the skills coming in and was really in this world of value investing, but yet he also had this interesting, unique opportunity created by Harvard professors. But it was at a time, I think, when the financial markets were less efficient and fluid, and maybe that experience doesn't even exist. That opportunity wouldn't even exist now.
True. Or if Jamie Dimon didn't have a Harvard MBA and went to Tuck or Columbia or Chicago or Darden or Michigan, would it have made a difference for Jamie Dimon? I doubt it.
Yeah, I have to imagine that guy's hardwired.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get to be the CEO of JP Morgan.
No.
Just that guy's got, I don't know him at all personally, but that guy has got to be absolutely hardwired to just kill it every day. You can't get there without it being something within you.
Bottom line, Harvard, Stanford, or Wharton are great, but so are so many other schools that have spectacular world-class MBA programs that can allow you to fulfill your dreams.
Absolutely. I think keep saying tail wagging the dog. It's you. You are going to define your future. You're not going to go to a school and the school suddenly drag you along, pull you along in your career. You're gonna make your own way. So I couldn't agree more. And I think it's an important thing for a lot of applicants to hear.
Jeremy, thank you.
Thanks so much, John.